Hey, this is Tash Street with Positive Out Loud. I am here in Isla Mujeres, and I happened to meet a really cool individual. He's been here for about a month now, right?
Yeah, just under that.
Cool. His name is Ted Richardson, and we've seen each other sporadic. When we first got here, we met, and he had a University of Washington t-shirt on, and I'm like, hey, I'm from Seattle. You have to be from Seattle, and he definitely was. So we were able to connect that way. And I wanted to be able to interview him because he's really into these really great causes and helping out people all around the world. And here we go.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, Taz.
Yeah, not a problem. So first of all, the first question I have is where did you start? Where did you grow up? What was it like in your childhood? And just tell me a little bit of your background first.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Oregon. It was just my mom and I. And so not having any brothers and sisters and no dad, my mom and I kind of had to be tight, right? Otherwise, it would have been a horrible childhood. And thankfully, we are.
Well, we connect that way because it was just me and my mom.
Oh, yeah?
You never know.
Cool. I did not know that.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, everyone asked me, I was like, did it feel weird not having a dad or brothers or sisters? And I didn't know any other reality, so it didn't feel weird.
Right, I get that all the time. Well, don't you want to have brothers and sisters, or I don't know what that would feel like.
Yeah,
I'm happy the way I am.
I have no idea. Or like a dad, like maybe I would have had a poor dad, or like a guy who didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
And that would have sucked.
That would have been worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Oregon. Went to university in Oregon, Willamette University, small school. And came to Seattle after I graduated and have worked on and off in Seattle and in Latin America ever since, mostly in the nonprofit sector.
So you grew up as an only child, and so what type of relationship did you have with your mom?
She sacrificed everything.
Yeah.
Like, she was working swing shift and coming to pick me up when I was a little kid at the babysitter's at 1 a.m.
Oh, wow.
And then driving me back to school the next day at 7 a.m.
Wow.
Like,
so you're kind of like a latchkey kid like I was, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
She worked a lot. My mom did too. So it's funny and all that. Oh my God.
Yeah, we didn't know this before this interview.
There was no clue. We had no idea. That's what's so great about these interviews. I just kind of like to go with the flow and see what happens. So, what sparked you into wanting to be able to help people and just help humanity in general?
Yeah, so I thought you might ask this, so I thought about this question ahead of time. So sophomore year of high school, I had to do 10 hours of community service for my humanities class, and it was a week until the end of the semester, and I hadn't done any community service, and I was going to fail the class. And so, real like philanthropic kid. And so we were in an assembly, and I don't remember who, some woman spoke about volunteer opportunities. And I just needed to do 10 hours, didn't matter what. And so I approached her afterwards and said, I need to connect with you, please give me an opportunity. And she said, okay, well, we're going bowling this afternoon.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, bowling? That's not volunteering. Volunteering is supposed to be boring. Like, bowling's fun.
Right.
So I said, okay, so I'll go bowling. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I assumed it was going to be with elderly folk, because there had to be some sense of volunteering. But it was it turned out to be with autistic and Down syndrome adults, who I will say are the absolute most fun people to go bowling with, because you throw a strike or you throw a gutter ball and you get a huge, like, painful high five. It's that enthusiastic. And I ended up volunteering there for 3 years until I went off to college.
Wow.
But I successfully completed the 10 hours, and but realized that even though these people were low functioning autism or Down syndrome, I had so much to learn from them. And they were just some of that, their moods fluctuated a lot, but they were some of the happiest people at times that I've ever met.
Right.
And they were just such a joy to be around, and it totally changed the idea of what it meant to like give something to the community or to volunteer. Because Some of the most fun times of the week were bowling with these people, and
Oh, wow.
it was like hanging with friends.
Yeah, I used to be a shuttle driver for older people that couldn't get around, or disabled people, such as what disabled people you're talking about, and they'd get on the shuttle and they'd smile and they remember me, and that was one of my favorite jobs. I really enjoyed it.
I know. It's really the people you work with, and they're some of the best.
So from there, that was your sophomore year. What did you do when you decided to major in college? What made you decide to go into humanities there?
Sure. Okay. So then I got into university. Fast forward a few years, I studied abroad in Mexico, in Oaxaca, and spent some time living, just brief periods living in indigenous communities, Zapoteco and Mixteco communities. And
where was that?
Mixteco is mostly in the northern part of Oaxaca, and so Oaxaca is sort of where Mexico gets really skinny at the isthmus,
Right.
And then it expands back out into the Yucatan. And Zapoteco is like right in the middle of the state. They're the two biggest indigenous groups in Oaxaca. But living with these people, living for a few days with these people, if anyone's ever had the chance to spend time with, I call them abuelitas, like old Mexican grandmothers in Mexico, they're some of the most loving, adoring, and forceful cooks that I've ever met. She was not satisfied until I'd had 4 helpings.
Oh my gosh.
But it was absolutely delicious. Some of the best food I've ever had.
So you gained weight there?
Yeah. Then I got sick and I lost it, so it's all good.
Right.
But then it's essentially a mortar and pestle. It's called a molcajete, and it's what they make their salsas out of. They grind the chili, onions, and everything else in there by hand. And this abuelita, I complimented her on her molcajete and how good the salsa she made was. And she got really excited, and she ran to the back of the house to get her spare molcajete, and then gave it to me. And I couldn't take it. I'm this, rich white kid from the U.S. She's a very impoverished, old Mexican indigenous grandmother. I can't take things from you. But I could quickly realize it was an absolute sign of respect. That she could give me something. And so it meant so much to her for me to be able to take that offering from her. And I couldn't give her anything in return. We weren't allowed to give money because it would kind of corrupt the relationship between the organization we were with and the villages. And it just struck me that someone with so few material possessions could give me something so special to them. And I don't think that to give something like that ever would have even crossed my mind. And so I felt a lot of guilt. I wasn't quite sure what to do with that for a while. White guilt is what I suppose it's called. But eventually realized that it wasn't very useful to feel guilt. Guilt's not helping anybody, right?
No.
So when I got back to the U.S., I started volunteering again with the immigrant rights group in Oregon, and got really involved in that community. And so by the time I graduated college, my resume was essentially filled with a lot of nonprofit jobs, internships, and volunteer positions. And it just felt natural to begin working full-time in the nonprofit sector.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about your travels, where you've been. You said you've been to South America quite a bit, and some of the things that you've done to help in that area.
Sure. So from a young age, my mom always told me that travel is a form of education. And I absolutely believe that, because we can become so insulated in our own place and culture that when we don't connect with others, we can become very volatile, I would say, as you can see with all the immigration issues right now in the United States, and the hostility that we see, all the like nationalism around the world. But when you travel, you see so many more similarities between people than differences. And so she really instilled that in me from when I was 8, I would say.
Did you travel a lot with your mother?
She gave me the opportunities to. She was able to. I went on a few high school trips when I was a kid, and she saw that as a form of education to send me to Costa Rica for part of the summer, and thought that there was nothing better that I could do for my education than go to Costa Rica.
Absolutely.
Which, totally cool with me, right? Like, I didn't mind. And then, so into college, I knew that I wanted to study abroad and wanted to travel. And then after college, I was lucky enough to, I had this very romantic idea that I was going to travel to South America, because I'd spent 4 years learning Spanish and learning about all of Latin American history, politics, culture, economics, everything.
So you learned that in college? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had this very romantic idea that I would buy a one-way ticket to Latin America, so I went to Bolivia, and either find a job and settle down, or fall in love and settle down. After 6 months, it was all...
When was this, right after college? Or?
Yeah, right after. I think I was 22 at the time. And 6 months later, I was had seen 7 countries and was lonely and flew home for Christmas. So neither of the two things I thought would happen did, but it was.
You never know what you're gonna get, right?
Yeah. And that's when I moved to Seattle.
And so you moved to Seattle to finish college, or?
No, just start working.
Start working. Okay.
Yeah, I had a AmeriCorps position. If people know what that is, it's
AmeriCorps, right?
Yeah, essentially the Peace Corps, but within the United States. And you get placed locally with either a government department or mostly with nonprofits.
So the University of Washington was just...
That's where I go to grad school now.
Grad school, okay,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm a public administration master's student.
University of Washington.
Yeah. Evans School.
Yeah, right. So, and why are you in Isla, how do you say it exactly? Is it Isla?
There you go.
Isla Mujeres. Why are you here now?
Isla Mujeres, yeah.
Tell us in detail how it all started back in Seattle to where you are now.
Sure. So, Isla Mujeres is a small island off of Cancun. I think it's maybe 7 or 8 miles off the coast of Cancun, and 17,000 people, but it's only 2 square miles, 4 miles by a half a mile, and so it's pretty dense, and there's a lot of poverty here. There are still communities here that are cardboard and tin shacks, without plumbing, without proper bathrooms, and really a lot of alcoholism and not much, really not any job opportunities for the people living here. And so the priest on the island actually is a real, he's a real go-getter. He does not know how many churches he's built in his career. I asked him and he started counting and he lost track. So he's really accomplished a lot in terms of building and working within the community. And so he's since shifted from churches to building a university on the island. And so it'll be a vocational university that will teach local youth to work mostly in the tourism industry here, which is where a lot of the higher paying jobs are. So in hotel management or business management, in languages, so anyone who can actually speak English well or another language can be a pretty successful tour guide, or with computers, or chefs also get paid pretty well here. So the university is focusing on those 5 areas. And so one day, Padre Raul, he's the priest, he was performing mass, and I guess my boss, Jack, he Jack was at mass. Jack is from Seattle, and
So Jack was at mass right here at this
yeah,
church?
Jack. I don't know which church. There are 4 churches on the island, and I don't know which church. I should ask him. But so Jack was at mass, and Padre Raul starts talking about this university. And Jack has recently had a lot of success in Seattle as an entrepreneur. If anyone, just a shameless shout out, if anyone likes barbecue, go to Jack's Barbecue. It's delicious.
And what part of Seattle?
Soto.
Sourdough.
Yeah. And so Jack's had quite a lot of success with his restaurant. And so he figured that this was a real moment to take advantage of with his restaurant and this university being built, because he can utilize all of his success in Seattle to transfer resources to this university. And so Jack approached Padre Raul afterwards, wanting to get involved. But Jack runs a restaurant full time in Seattle, is opening 2 new restaurants, and speaks a little bit of Spanish, but not a ton. So we connected through a friend of ours. Jack and Ben had both gone to Texas A&M's barbecue camp, which is run by several PhD professors who study, is it food? Some sort of food science. But they basically have barbecue literally down to a science.
So I would definitely check out Jack's barbecue.
Yeah, basically. And so Ben and I had worked together before. He used to volunteer for me. And so Jack and I connected. And since I'm on summer break from university, I'm down here researching the needs of the island, and we're also starting a nonprofit to be the U.S. fundraising arm for this university, because a lot of Americans have so far wanted to donate, but it's actually really difficult to donate currently because there's no American nonprofit set up for which they can donate to. And so just legally setting up that organization will be a big help for the university.
So are you a part of that process too? Or?
That's what we're focused on right now.
Okay, cool.
But also trying to really understand the need in the community and the need of Padre Raul and his team working down here.
So I've only been here for about 4 or 5 days, and I've seen how people are just right out of their own home, they are creating a business. You know, by making food for people as they're walking down the street. They'll put a little sign out with a chalkboard sign, and this is what we have to eat, and you just kind of stop, and they put a little table out with chairs, and then you eat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean they're doing whatever they can to survive, right?
Yeah, it's and it's interesting how different some of the communities are. So if you walk about a mile south of here, you'll see the other communities. They're called invasiones, which means invasions, which it's the word that they use for these communities, and these are the cardboard and tin shack communities. But how dehumanizing is the word invasion to describe your community?
Right.
Like, they've been there for 20 years. They're not invading anybody, and they're the ones that are worst off on the whole island. Like, it was only a few months ago that bathrooms were installed in some of the houses. They still don't have plumbing, no access to water. It was, before a few months ago, it was open defecation in ditches, which I had only ever heard of happening in India and Bangladesh.
Wow.
So some of the really, really poor parts of the world where it's less than $1 a day.
Well, I saw a lot of young kids just peeing right off the street. I mean, today we were driving to North Beach, and I was like, wow, he's just peeing right there in the street.
Yeah, but if you don't have a bathroom. But yeah, it's those communities that we're really trying to
Mm-hmm.
not help, but provide.
And of course, I haven't seen that community yet because I'm headed to the nicer area
Right.
where we want to go to the beach because we're on vacation.
It's a long ways from the tourism part.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They kind of keep it hidden.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what we're doing down here right now. We don't yet have the nonprofit legally registered.
Mm-hmm.
It'll probably be called the Yucatan Education Project. We're hoping to eventually, 10, 15 years down the line, expand to a few other communities around the Yucatan Peninsula,
Mm-hmm.
because we should be easily able to replicate the model.
So once people are able to donate, I could, put a link below. And,
That would be wonderful.
yeah. I mean, once everything's set
Yeah.
up, it may be a while, but.
Yeah, it might be a while, but I'll let you know in 5 months or something.
Exactly.
We have to get a website, and it takes a while to register a nonprofit.
So how much longer are you here for then?
About a month.
About a month.
So it's a little dependent
For
on
your summer break.
Yeah. It's dependent on how much work is needed here, how much work is needed back in Seattle. I'm hoping to go see all the other possible sites that they would build future universities at.
So would they teach people English as well, you think? To help
Yeah,
them?
so
That would be really needed.
what's crazy about this program is it's actually going to be entirely in English,
Oh, wow.
which I think is going to be a real shock to all the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how you learn a language, is you have to be immersed in it. Like, to learn Spanish, I had to live for 4 months in Mexico and didn't speak a single word of English for 4 months.
Right.
And
It's really difficult for me because I don't speak hardly any Spanish, and being here, nobody hardly speaks any English, so
yeah,
it's been a little frustrating. Thank God I have my other half who does speak a little bit of Spanish, so that gets us around
Yeah, she's
here
pretty
and there.
good,
Yeah,
that
she's
is.
pretty good, but yeah, it's difficult. So I think it's great that they're going to be immersed in the English, so they can really
Yeah.
learn.
yeah. And then a few of them will choose to take the language track, so they'll learn probably French or German,
Mm-hmm.
maybe Italian, and which would be the easiest for them coming from Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
But because you do get some tourists from other parts of the world who don't speak great English,
Mm-hmm.
and then having someone who can give a tour or speak to them in their native language would be really useful.
Right.
And if they have that specific skill, that's also going to earn them a much better wage.
Whatever vocation they decide to use
Yeah.
for the tourism, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, where do you think, since you've been doing all this work in humanities, where do you think you were able to get this compassion from? Where did it all start?
Um,
Do you think part of it was just like having a single mother and
I was thinking about this too before we did this today, and because I thought you might ask that. And the only answer I could come up with was that I don't think that people give just for others.
Mm-hmm.
I think often giving and doing for others is, in a way, something we do for ourselves, because it does feel really good,
It does,
honestly.
yeah.
Like, every time you donate, every time that you volunteer, you do get a bit of a rush.
Mm-hmm.
And so last fall, I had a bit of a rough patch in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was going through a breakup in first quarter of grad school. All that made life a little
grad
difficult.
school's already hard enough.
Yeah, right. So I went and saw a therapist a few times, and first session he says, "Ted, you are excessively introspective."
Mm-hmm.
And this is a therapist that told me that. And I'm like, yeah, I spend a lot of time in my head. And I realized I spent a lot of time in my head thinking about myself.
Okay.
And about either what I should be doing differently, how cool I am, or why I'm right about things.
Right.
Like, I spent a lot of selfish time in here,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly too much. And thinking about this today, I realized that volunteering and giving is one of the ways that I've really gotten away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And because when you do something for others or with others, it's always about something bigger than yourself.
Exactly.
And
yeah, right.
because in the end, like, none of us really matter. Like, I'm one of 7 billion people who's here for, you know, hopefully 80 or so years, but maybe less. But that's a blink of an eye.
Right.
And, like, however much I think I matter, that's not true. Like, I'm not going to be famous. You write a biography about a upper middle class straight white guy, like, no one's going to read that book. No one's going to read that book. And so I really don't matter that much. But when you...
But, you know, when you look at that, you say nobody's going to read that book. But this is the reason why I do these interviews, because I want people to get to know people who are really, like, in the midst of life, giving to others.
Sure.
You know, not getting a lot of attention,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And we all deserve that attention because we are, you know, we're all spectacular in our own way. And just because we can't play, you know, soccer really well, you know,
No,
or football or tennis or whatever, you know, all these sports that people get a lot of attention for, or can act or sing or whatever. But, you know, in our own way, we're all doing something spectacular in the world, and we all need to be noticed for what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And to try and connect that, I think that we all can get to know each other a little better.
Yeah.
And I really shy away from the word help, because I don't really think it's a little bit of a paternal word, but when we work with other people, we do get to know them a lot better. And I think that's what the world really needs more of, is that connection.
Right.
And when you work with other people in that way, like you doing your podcast or here on Isla Mujeres, you are connecting with people in a way that's much greater than any one of us are. And I think that's what's always that's what I've always felt in giving to the community or working with the community. And,
you kind of forget about yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. It feels good to forget about yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
But it feels good to be recognized.
I mean, yeah, we have to be able to take care of ourselves and do that self-care kind of thing, which is always necessary. But I think growing up in the culture that we grow up in, especially being only children, we're constantly in our heads, you know, because we didn't have anybody to communicate with on a peer level, like, you know, a sister or brother. So me having a child really got me thinking about others, and I think if I wouldn't have had a child, I still would have been pretty self-oriented, you know.
I do not have children, but I would very much like to have a child. In part just so that I am no longer able to prioritize myself. Like, so that it is absolutely clear that I have to think about somebody else first. There's some attraction.
But then you get into that, and then you're like, oh, I do have to take care of myself too.
And it just becomes even harder to take care of yourself.
You have to get up a little earlier to maybe meditate, or, you know, read that book, or whatever it is that you do to take care, exercise, or whatever it is that you do to take care of yourself.
And to be a good parent. Yes.
To be a good parent, yeah.
To be a good person in general too. Yeah.
It's all a learning curve for me, and figuring it all out, and what exactly is enough time for me, and then what's enough time for her, and enough time for my partner, and
Apple. I mean, I guess I've only seen the very wonderful sides of Apple, but she's amazing. She's quite a character.
Yeah, there's not very many bad sides to her. It's pretty phenomenal.
I've seen 0 so far.
Yeah, I mean, good or bad, whatever you want to call it, but yeah, we all have our moods, and especially when we're tired and hungry. And hot, and Isla Mujeres. It gets very hot here, by the way.
Yes.
But you know, when I'm walking down these streets and I see people living in these small little, I don't know, it's just like one room, right? And everything's open, and it's steaming hot, very humid, and I think to myself, I am so lucky that I don't have to live like this. And how do these people do it every day? How do they survive, you know?
I mean, that's one of the beauties of travel, is you really see other realities. And it it's always put me in my place, because I always am worried about my problems or my issues.
We have none.
Yeah. And like I remember yesterday I didn't have a great day. It was fine, but not a great day.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually don't remember what my problems were yesterday. But I remember I had problems, but I don't remember what they were. But yeah, here traveling, getting to know people who materially have a lot less than we do,
Mm-hmm.
you really feel a lot more fortunate for everything that we have.
Mm-hmm. So what is your goals in the future? What is it that you think you want to do
Yeah.
as a career?
So I'd like to stay in the nonprofit world.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very exhilarating world to work in. My frustration is that nonprofit workers are usually overworked and underpaid.
Mm-hmm.
Like I used to run a food bank, and while I ran that food bank, I qualified for affordable housing.
Wow.
And that was, it is what it is. It was an amazing job. Like I got to, every 2 minutes I watched a family walk out with a grocery cart full of food for their children. Like,
Which food bank was this?
Hope Link over on the east side.
East side of
It was in Kirkland.
Kirkland. Okay.
Yeah. Hope Link's a pretty large nonprofit, but only on the east side.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a drug to watch a family be able to feed their children every 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is an incredible rush. And of course you don't get that at every job, but
Right.
The low wage was worth it for that. And I totally lived off that adrenaline. And so I'd like to stay in the nonprofit world, but there's definitely a concern about it not being able to live in Seattle on nonprofit wages,
Yeah,
which is
that's hard.
really, it's sad, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Same with teachers or public servants. But I'm really growing more interested in sort of the culture and spirit of philanthropy,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't have to be in the nonprofit sector.
Mm-hmm.
So you're starting to see a lot more for-profit businesses finding ways to give back either through corporate philanthropy or through for-profit investments.
Mm-hmm.
If you look up social impact investing, it's a lot of complicated financial tools
Mm-hmm.
that I don't yet understand. But finding the way that that sector can work in a philanthropic way
Mm-hmm.
is where I think we'll see the giving community shift towards. And I think that'll be, if I can work my way into that sphere, or work in a sort of more broad vision of philanthropy. So there are a lot of really cool organizations in Seattle that, like the United Way or the Seattle Foundation or the Seattle International Foundation,
Mm-hmm.
that are sort of working to make the whole community more philanthropic. Because I was thinking, you asked one of your other guests what their why is.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about that, and I'd always thought my why was to sort of absolve the guilt that I felt with that abuelita long ago.
Coming back to that, right?
But I don't think that just giving back should be anybody's why. I think that's just something that we should all do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And that the why has to be something else, because I just think that philanthropy should be part of something that we all do.
Mm-hmm.
But cultivating and growing a spirit and culture of philanthropy, I think, is what I'm more attracted to.
Now, do you think, because I am a federal worker and I've been a federal worker for many years, and I see so many people just get really comfortable in what they're doing, and they go to work and they go home, and they just don't, they're just thinking about their own comfort and their own needs. And I just see them not really thinking about other people, or not doing what you do, or the way that we see things differently in some ways. Do you think that the U.S. in general is just really comfortable?
I've seen a lot of the same. But I don't think that you have to go outside of the U.S. to jerk yourself out of that sense of comfort.
Just walk down the streets of Seattle.
Yeah, but walk down the streets of Seattle and get to know the people on the streets of Seattle.
Right.
Like I used to volunteer for Roots. It's a homeless shelter for a youth homeless shelter in the U District, and some of the kids that would stay there were some of the most amazing, smart people I'd ever met. Like, I spent 30 minutes trying to understand a kid explaining astrophysics to me. Like, on his cot, on the floor in the homeless shelter. I'm like, dude, I do not understand you, but I'm going to sit here in awe of you. And that definitely got me out of my comfort level. And I don't know if it's just America. I think that we, as humans, like, seek out that comfort. I mean, most of my friends, my, like, really close friends, they all look kind of like me. They're all straight white guys. And I don't know, I don't have any explanation for why those have happened to be all my best friends, but that's true. But
because you relate to people who you can relate to yourself, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel comfortable with those guys for some reason, more than I would with anybody else. So I think we do seek out that comfort, but at the same time, we owe it to ourselves and to others to jerk ourselves out of that at times. And I've honestly found volunteering to be a very good way to do that. At the Hopeling Food Bank, one of the things I loved was most of my volunteers were middle class and upper middle class retired white people, and my clients were a lot of working families, a lot of immigrant elderly populations, and there were over 40 languages spoken at this food bank.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, honestly. Just a wonderful mix of people. But that group of volunteers and those many different groups of clients never would have interacted with each other if it weren't for the food bank. And it was the only place that they ever would have talked to each other.
Right.
And I saw some amazing friendships grow out of that. And
that's the way it is. I notice when I travel, and I don't do this really in Seattle, but when I'm traveling and I see another American, I'm like, hey, how's it going?
Yeah, you yell at me from across the street.
Or even just anybody. I'm like, because you're kind of here just with your family, and you're not here with your friends or anything like that. So you want to reach out and you want to connect, because that's just our natural way of being as a human. We just want to connect with people, and so I notice myself connecting more when I'm traveling. And I think if I put myself, and you're making me think here, if I put myself out more just at home and connecting better that way, imagine what I can do there, right?
Yeah, it's harder. It is harder at home for some reason, because maybe we have less comforts while we're traveling, so we are forced to go out and connect more. Maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Like I certainly have all my comforts in my apartment in Seattle, and spend many a night by myself doing a puzzle or listening to a podcast or something, and not talking to anybody. But yeah, I think we should definitely all try to get out of our comfort zone, and just meeting people that are different from us is the way that I've found is best to do that.
So, just meeting Ted here on this podcast got you out of your comfort zone. So it made you think about traveling, made you think about giving yourself to a certain cause.
Absolutely.
So, I think my last question would be, so it's about the why.
Okay.
I like to do the whys.
Sure.
So, what are your whys, and why do you do what you do, and why are you going to grad school and doing the human services kind of field, and what do you think is your major why in this?
Yeah.
And if you don't have one, that's cool too.
I think I've always gotten something out of, just going back to the last question, out of connecting with people who are different than myself, and have found that working in the nonprofit sector or in volunteering has been a really good way to meet people I wouldn't otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's autistic adults or Mexican or Latino immigrants, or even my 80-year-old volunteers at the food bank who I got to know quite well. I never would have talked to a lot of 80-year-old retired guys.
And they have a lot of wisdom.
They do.
You can ask them a lot of questions.
And a lot of cheesy jokes. And that's always been, I feel like I learn best from other humans.
Mm-hmm.
And that has always been a real way for me to learn and to grow and to get outside of myself has
Mm-hmm.
been through those connections with people who are different than me. And so continuing that, and
Mm-hmm.
whether that's through a full-time job or a career, or volunteering or traveling apart from that, I'm not sure right now.
Mm-hmm.
But always finding those connections is certainly a why, and wanting to know the world. Like geography has always been very, very interesting to me,
Mm-hmm.
and memorizing maps since I was 4
Oh.
years old.
Really cool.
Like we had this like gross foam table map that my mom would always put
Mhm.
down. It had all the states and the capitals.
Mm-hmm.
So and then I would draw maps later in life, or like when I was 12 or 13, I would make up all these fantastical maps,
Oh, wow.
like magical stories that I'd read. But
And you're giving me some ideas to do with Apple, yeah.
it's a lot of, drawing maps is a lot of fun. But just getting out and getting to know the world,
Mm-hmm.
like I know I will never see all of the countries of the world, but it almost seems like a shame to me not to.
I think, what's kind of cool, since you're talking about seeing the world, maybe we can take a little bit of a walk and people can actually see what it's like here in Isla Mujeres, and,
Yeah,
That'd be
or
kinda
of
cool.
the university too.
Oh, the university, is it already starting to be built, or?
Yeah, there are 2 buildings completed already.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that too.
Yeah, no, absolutely, that would be cool.
All right, thank you so much for this interview and taking time out to do
Yeah,
this,
thank
and
you.
this has been awesome.
This has been a lot of fun.
Again, guys, this is Ted Richardson, a really awesome man, and the cause here is phenomenal. Like I said, I'll put a link below once we get all that
Might be a
information.
while.
It might be a while, but here we are
Thank
in
you, Tess.
Mexico. All right, take
Yeah.
care.
Adios.